I'm here, and if anybody else wants in, that's good too. So I was supposed to bring you video 1 to go through, so I apologize. God willing, I will have that for you next week. I ran into 2 problems with it. One, the technical problem that we thank Eric Zetterston for figuring out, but I had bought lights to illuminate the box off of Amazon, and apparently not only are they blindingly bright, but they apparently contain part of the spectrum that the camera reacts poorly to. So finally figured out the solution to that one, which is more lower powered lights in a different type of bulb. But bottom line is all my drawings were not working. The other part was I think I had to bite off on something that I didn't want to, which is the real answer to that particular problem has to do with, I just have to assert something I already believe, but there's no way to answer it completely without just saying there's no such thing as an actual infinite, there are only potential infinites. And so when you run your analysis, you have to be aware that you're constructing something, and then construction is a process, and the processes must be equal. If the processes are equal, then you get the same answer to Bertrand's paradox. So it unfortunately means that the video is longer than I want it to be and more complicated, because you either have to answer that question all the way through, or you have to say, I'm going to assert something that most people don't believe in the hopes that you'll believe it, and then show why it works, and then watch this other video if you want to know why I don't. So, I'll bring a short version of that forward, and you can decide how it works. In the meantime, so while I'm also now realizing that if I don't set aside actual blocked hours to do this, it's not going to happen. So now this week I'm scheduling when that gets done. And that'll be the long-term version for all this stuff. So using this now, I guess, bonus week that I bought by my own stupidity, what I would love to do is me not talk, but go through these topics right here that you have. And as I've been forced to do in the Bertrand's paradox / infinites thing, is break down what my point is into the simplest possible argument. I'm interested in what you think at the end of the video on each one of these. What is the actual argument that you want people to walk away with? What is it stated in its simplest possible form? And then, of course, what I'm doing is taking that, making good argument for it, and illustrating that argument in such a way that's compelling and comprehensible to the average viewer of whatever population we're targeting for that truth. So I say let's just go down the list here, and if you want to hop from one to the other, fine. But help me break out, and by the way, this also is an indicator of how well we understand this in here. If we can't articulate it, and maybe we don't have it solved. But starting with the problem of pain, or whichever one you want, what's the point? What's the major point you want, and what's the argument for that point?
So this is not that, but you're doing a video. I wasn't here.
Yeah.
Were we here last week?
Yes.
Okay. Was I here last week?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, must have been the week before.
Okay.
That's a good start. If you could make like a fact sheet or minimal necessary information sort of on these things, so that we have a good, concise answer that we can reference. Because a video, I'm asking you to do all the work.
Yes, so, and I'm like, absolutely, I'll do that. Now, let's go to you for what you think those ought to be.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's my job to do that, but I'm actually interested in whether I've got it in the simplest possible way.
Okay.
So I have answers to all of these, but I want to know what your answers are to all these. And I don't want to poison the well any more than I have. But what is the answer to this?
The one I like for that one is God didn't make a terrarium for his human pets.
Okay. What else?
Again, there's a lot of answers to the problem of pain. What I like about your answer is that it's novel, and and not just postulating that the purpose of this world isn't simply for human enjoyment, but that there's a two-world solution. I'm getting ahead of myself. That's the solution to the problem. The problem is you could naively divide humanity into 4 groups based on what they would choose. Those who always choose good, always evil, etc., etc., etc. And then if you were a God who was interested in creating a utopia with the largest number of people freely electing to join it, and free will exists and you can't just make someone do something, what's the best way to get there? And you postulate I don't know how you want to call it, but this 2-world solution which tracks identically with kind of what we see.
Okay.
Just quickly, are we talking about, is this problem pain, is that equal to the problem of evil? Is that what we're addressing?
Yeah. What is called I have heard Craig, as an example, break it into the logical problem of evil and the emotional problem of evil, also called the probabilistic problem of evil.
Right.
So the latter.
Reasonable Faith has produced videos on this topic at least.
Yes. What is their solution?
It goes to the multiple points of knowing God's an infinite good, that's the purpose of life, and the purpose of life is always happiness, that there's justifiable reasons for allowing evil.
Yeah, and that, to me, that's the kind of standard good Christian answer to it. The reason that I like this other one is it ties together. So if I would add anything to this, it's that happiness is the end goal. So I take of some of the solutions that are out there, saying stuff like, well, the purpose of life isn't to be happy. And I disagree. I think the purpose of life is to be happy.
Well, they define happiness as doing whatever they want, whatever they want.
Right, but that's not a good definition of happiness. And nobody, if you examine it, actually believes that is the definition of happiness. Because they'll turn around and say, I see this person doing whatever they want, but I also see them being unhappy.
Right, but the general audience, if you tell them do what God wants, they'll say that doesn't make me happy.
Which is why it's not that I disagree with their end state, it's that the way they say it to me is wrong. Because what is it that, another way of saying do what God wants is, do what's going to make you the most happy. That there's a difference between, I guess if I would add in here, there's a difference between doing what you think makes you happy and doing what actually makes you happy.
It depends on the time preference.
Sort of. So my argument against that is people who are running a marathon during mile 20 are still happy. Some of them. Some of them are miserable. But some of them are very happy at that point. Even though the level of pain and immediate reward or whatever else is at a local minimum. I'm using mile 20. I don't know where it actually happens, maybe. But if they have the right mindset, they're still happy there. Why? So anyway, I think if there's a feature here that I wanted to bring up too, that's that.
I think too, I really like Reasonable Faith's videos.
Yes.
I still use them whenever my friends bring this topic up.
Yes.
And he does a good job addressing it, but he divides it into the logical problem and the probabilistic problem. And then he gives excellent answers for this. But I think what makes your answer different from all the other ones I've seen is this examination of
this part right
4
here.
different groups of humans.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then I would like to add to that in hopes that it's a feature that you find equally pleasing, this part right here. because I think this is a separate point, but it's equally important. By the way, I think I'm okay. If it came out in the Reasonable Faith board, we had a board meeting last night, and it was 2 pieces of news came out that I think are worthwhile, and I think that they published these data, so I don't think there's a problem saying it. Number 1, Bill's systematic theology stuff is like, he's done with it. He's completed it, wow. And he's got it to the publisher. I won't say who the publisher is.
The first volume.
2 volumes.
2 volumes.
Yeah, and the publisher, like, I think that it's under, it's positive in that it looks like the publisher's accepting it.
Wow.
So the good news is, for those of us who've been waiting for that for a while, it's on its way. It's hitting the right wickets to get through. So that'll be good. And then I hope, I think we all hope that it's as tiled correctly as possible in the tiling model there. And I imagine it probably is as well. The other thing was, to those who like his videos, one of the questions was, do we do, inflation, donations, all that stuff, austere financial environment, do we scale back on any of the video production, or do we scale back on any of the advertising for the video production? And it sounded like the conclusion was no to either one of those. They're too impactful, or they're doing too well. So they're going to continue to invest in doing the kind of videos that you're talking about, which I think is good news too, among other things. Okay. Anything else we would say on this? And is there any, like, if you had to say it in a sentence, how would you say it? Or a paragraph at a maximum. If you had to tweet the answer to this. And by the way, there's a reason for needing this in short format, which is, I'm the worst at. YouTube Shorts are it. And I take tweets plus YouTube Shorts plus TikTok plus Instagram to equal the following. The human being wants to know the answer in 15 seconds.
Right.
Or 30 seconds max. So at some point, obviously there are answers you can't give in 30 seconds. But if you can't give the answer in 30 seconds, enough that people are like, I'll click on that for the 2-minute video, and then I'll click on that for the 6-minute video, then I'll click on that for the 20-minute video, then I'll click on that for the hour-long video. The people, while long-form videos are getting put out there and they are getting consumed, YouTube Shorts, TikTok, all the short stuff is the stuff that's going through the roof. So we have to connect. I think it's wise to connect those things together.
I was going to ask how long are the videos intended to be?
I think I'm chasing bad length format. So I 100% am going off of minute physics because, well, not 100%, 50% off minute physics and maybe 50% off of a group of videos like Veritasium, like some of these other videos that I think take difficult. The one I'm resisting a little bit is Grant Sanderson's 3 Blue, 1 Brown mathematics videos. Because I think his audience is a little more dedicated on the mathematics front. But if you take Numberphile as a bridge to his videos, almost all these videos are in the minute physics does some in 2 minutes, but most of them are 6 minutes long. And some of them are upwards of 12 to 15. So I'm shooting for 6 in the hopes that I can get it done in 6 to 8. And where I can't get it done in 6 to 8, I'm trying to keep it at 10.
I say that because this looks like 2 different videos. I know that the current culture would fiercely deny happiness being subjective.
Yes. So to really, I guess, points we made earlier, and Michael made it a couple times last time, was, and my wife has said this, which is, stop trying to pack it all in one video. It doesn't work that way. What you need is something that then lets you click on to the next ones. But I also want to, I've got to, as an example, when I say, so in the video that Numberphile does on Bertrand's paradox is superficial. And then he gives the bonus video where Grant talks about this stuff in, really, really good detail. He references all the major works on it. He references the textbooks on it. He identifies the key figures. He identifies what their historic viewpoint on this was in fairly short format, but he still touches them all. And then he identifies he says the one thing, which is the thing that I take exception to. He says something like, James's or Bertrand's lesson here was, or James's lesson here was, you have to be careful when infinities are involved. And he says, basically, shortly after, he goes, infinities are fine. Infinities are not the problem. They initially cause some difficulties, but they come with their own med kit to fix it. He says that. I'm like, absolutely not. Infinities are the problem. This is what's causing this difficulty. So I know that I'm going to have moments in there where the person's going to revolt against it. My problem is the solution to that one. Everybody who's serious about this topic will automatically revolt against that, whereas his thing that I'm revolting against is accepted by 95% of the people in the field. So how do you put in a video, a controversial topic that's like, if you want to know the answer to this, go click over here, in such a way that they either just don't ignore the rest of the video and be like, this guy's a pseudo-intellectual, doesn't know what he's talking about. If he knew anything, he'd know that there are solutions to this one on the infinitesimal side, or the infinities theories that we work on under Cantorian kind of categories of how infinities sit. And I want to say, no, it's not the case. So I've got to figure out a way to say it succinctly so that the cognoscenti on this one don't immediately write it off, because I want them as part of the viewing.
You start by like steelmanning that position.
Yeah, the problem is to get into that, to steelman the position, is 4 minutes of video too. And of a 6-minute video, 4 minutes of which is supporting your oppositional side of something that's tangentially relevant but foundational. I can't figure out a way to do that.
Well, if it starts with someone's like, the definition of happiness is obvious.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a good point.
To the question of like the one sentence summary of this.
Yes.
I'd say that this is the best possible world for just in phase one.
Very good. Okay. So I think I agree with you, because my opening paragraph on this, in the first version of this that I wrote, was this is the best. We're going to make an argument that this is the best possible world. So this is probably a better way to say it.
To that end, I don't see anything on that list that talks about call of maturity.
Okay.
And that, at least biblically speaking, it's clear that God wants mature, complete people. You don't do that sitting fat, happy on a couch. Does that make sense?
Yep. Mature, complete people are the goal. And not just God. We intuitively want that, I think.
Yeah. Similarly, if you're a marathon, it takes work to get there.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Teleporting to the end of a marathon gains nobody any credit.
Right.
Okay. Mark and then Seth.
Katie just said something about a lot of people in the world today would think that happiness is subjective. And that threw me off, because I thought ultimately, isn't happiness subjective? If it's not, it's got to be my happiness, right?
Yes. So, sorry, Katie.
Yeah, I guess I was saying, I was remembering, it was 2 of them, anyway, when a lot of our friends came in for the wedding, we were talking about happiness, and the question was, can you define happiness? And the answer was like, you can't define happiness, it's different for everyone. But I think the argument there was like, the person using drugs, that is happiness for them. Okay. Whereas you would say, from an outside perspective, we would see that it's hurting them. So there are.
Okay.
It is.
Yes.
It is in many ways subjective, but at the same time, maybe you don't understand.
We can fool ourselves and
Yeah.
be confused. Okay.
Yeah,
I didn't think we disagreed. It was just the word choices I was trying. Okay.
It was more like if you went up to someone and said, I know it should make you happy, you're gonna get people really mad.
That's right. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so I think there are 2 points to draw out of this. One is the one that you're making, which to me is Lewis talks about this in the last battle of the book on the Narnian Chronicles thing, where he talks about the dwarfs who are in their mind, they're in the stable, but to Lucy and Edmund and Peter and everybody, they're sitting in this gorgeous field in heaven, but they won't see it. They will only see what they want to see. And they're like, the dwarves are for the dwarves. We would rather know this truth than whatever lies you're telling. So they've got it inverted. I think that's supposed to be a symbol. He does that again in the Great Divorce. So what's the book where he? Yeah. Yeah. So one of the, I forget which person that they run into after they get off the bus, but one of the people has basically formed their world in around themselves and refuses to look outwards and wants to be the author of their own world despite the fact that it's miserable. So, and maybe there's more than one are doing that, really. But the idea is to consider the drug addict, and maybe you ask him the question at 2 points. Right after he's injected himself with whatever it is that makes him feel euphoric, and if you could enter into his world enough to ask him a question he understands what you're asking, say, like, tell me the happiest time in your life. He might say right now. But then you know, once he's down off the high and you ask that question, would he honestly answer, it's when I'm high? Or then you say, okay, cut off the ones where you're high. And outside of drug usage, what's the happiest time in your life? And then presumably they had some good experience somewhere, right? Hopefully there was one. And you take the facets of that, and you take the facets of, and you say, is that experience? And this was like, oh, I remember hiking with my uncle or father or whoever one time, and it was like, I really had a good time. It was beautiful. I enjoyed whatever it is. And you say, is this long-term sustainable? Can you just do this all the time, basically, or something equivalent? Where the answer is yes. And this drug thing, can you do it all the time? This euphoria, the answer is no. And then, you know, if you average over time how they feel, they probably are miserable, which is why they're seeking the high over here. So at some point, if you say, look, without getting all Leibniz and Newton on you, like, it's the area under the curve we're going through for here. Over time, what is it that makes you happy? And it's not happiest, what are the peaks? And then you might do a second analysis that says, what does it take to get to these peaks of happiness? Like, are there people who are happy, who hit these peaks of happiness more consistently than others? And I ask you that question. Do you think there's anybody who does, in your mind, the best job of being happy, the maximum amount of happiness over time? Especially in that they stay at higher levels of happiness. If you were forced to answer that question, who do you think that is and why? If you want me to rephrase it, just put your hand up.
Only because I was distracted.
Who does the best job, in your mind, either individuals or categories of people, of being the happiest over time? So like if you integrated under the curve and said how much area is under the curve of their plot of happiness. And maybe a second question of that, they may be related, they may not, but if like this is misery and this is baseline happiness and this is a peak of happiness, who does a better job of staying up at the peak level longer over time? Or does it have to be like this? Or are there people who are up here and like their residual, their ground state is higher?
It's so hard to tell looking at something. I just saw a video about this town in Oregon where there was this commune of religious cult, I don't know, and they were just loving life and happy and free and poisoning the town. And
Right.
So it's hard to, I mean, you can look at people and say, "Wow, these look like the happiest people," but you know, what do you really know about what's torturing them inside? Right.
So, I mean, if you were taking the position of maximum knowledge, assessed maximum knowledge, and you said, based on what I know, these people are doing the best job, who would it be? And maybe even if I disqualified like martyrs, the great saints of Christendom, forget the great saints of Christendom, we all know what that argument would be and why. Are there secular people who show a closer approximation of that than the normal secular person does, from which we could potentially extract?
I was going to say someone with like Down syndrome or something, where they're just, you know, if they are taken care of, right, they're just happy.
This is
you know.
ignorance is bliss.
So why though? Why?
I think because they don't, I've seen this in interacting with them, and I've heard this from a lot of people who spend a lot more time interacting with them. They just don't have the same cares that we do.
Yes. Why do we have those cares?
I think that is so we've been through this before, but I don't like the word happiness.
I know.
Yeah, but the reason for it is...
But like everybody else in humanity does. So that's why reason I'm
Well, but it still implies this emotional high, which none of us are talking about. And I'll tell you the reason why. I think the person who is happiest is the person who has, I think the main goal of life is relationship to love and be loved.
Yes.
And the person who's happiest is secure in themselves, centered, and has solid relationships that they think can be completely vulnerable and loved.
Okay, then let me ask. So let's take.
So that's not like this.
I got it. But let me ask you one that's not that, and then I'll try to draw what I think is a connective tissue between those two.
And that's the problem with drug addiction is rather than creating relationships, it isolates you and creates a false.
Okay, but let's consider the following facts in isolation, and then find out if they're actually connected.
All right.
I've mentioned it in here before, but I forget the name of her. She was like one of the best surfers in the world.
Sure.
Like competitive surfers.
Sure.
And I can't remember if she's on the beach or they're floating with her out while she's going to catch some waves or whatever. They're interviewing her, and they asked her, who's the best surfer in the world? And her answer was, whoever's having the most fun. Now, why was the answer? So they expected she to give it in terms of skill at surfing. And she was trying to point out that the purpose of skill in surfing is, if you're doing it properly in her mind, was to have fun.
Yeah, sure.
But for her, and presumably other competitive surfers, they enjoy competing and they enjoy surfing.
Sure.
And that they probably enjoy competing so much more than surfing that if it wasn't surfing, it might be, curling or or long jump or something like that. And they enjoy the competition process. And what she's saying is, I think what she's saying is, if competing is what makes you happy, and surfing is one of the ways that works there, then that's really the thing that's helping you be happy. What she should have said in context of their question is, whoever's the most happy in competing over time. But what she's really saying is who enjoys surfing the most, because the question was not who's the best competitor, it's who's the best surfer. So I assume that she saw surfing as a means to feeling her love of competition, but that if properly asked, the question is who's the best surfer? It's the purposes of all this, of competition and of surfing and of curling, is to have fun. Now, what is fun? Okay, maybe that's closer to the euphoria kind of thing. But if I asked you the question, like, is it more in this language, which is admittedly not the best language to do so, but is it more fun to have a person in your life that loves you and you love, or is it more fun to be hated by everybody and hate everybody? So whatever that, like, you're going to say, like, fun's the wrong word for that. But what I mean is emotional and mental enjoyment.
Right, and I would even say, sure, she said fun, but I would love to have a conversation with her and boil down to the root of that, because I suspect that is highly, that's a very superficial term, right? It may be, for instance, I like cycling, you all know that, right? I love getting out there and I want to be in shape enough so I can just ride fast and not struggle, right? At the same time, I am also competitive. And if someone goes off the front, I'm chasing. Right. And all right, let's boil that down. If I was going to be completely honest, I would say that there's a lot of in that statement of feeling good about myself and having others also appreciate me.
Right.
Because and that is relationship. That is centeredness and it's relationship.
Right. Well, there's nobody who likes competition who doesn't realize, hopefully, eventually, that has to do with relationship too. Unfortunately, competition is. I would like the relationship to be that I'm the best and that you all say that I'm the best, right? So,
Right, because
is that
you want
good?
adoration for who you are, and you're trying to build who you are so that people can provide adoration.
Right.
It still boils down to relationship and being centered in who you are.
So, and I don't know if she meant this, but she might have been making the point of like, if you're looking for the best surfers in the world, don't look on the competitive circuit. Because we've managed to make, she probably wasn't saying this, but we've managed to make selfish pursuit of the desired acknowledgement of others for our superior skill the thing that tells us whether we're happy or not. When in reality, the guy who's out there just like, wow, this is a lot of fun, woo! That person's enjoying it more. So what if instead of fun, she used the term, whoever's enjoying themselves the most?
Maybe, sure, maybe.
Okay.
But that, it still boils down to, I think that is what this is, the whole idea of happiness is about.
But that's why I'm trying to use that phrase of if people are saying like, who's the best surfer in the world? And her answer is whoever enjoys surfing the most. And you say like, what does enjoys mean? Enjoy. Okay, well, obviously we're getting towards it. It makes them happy. Whoever's the happiest when they're surfing?
Well, it literally means enjoy.
Yeah, but joy and happiness are
contentment.
related words, right? They're very closely related words.
Happiness and joy?
They're more closely related than happiness and trash can.
You sure?
Sure. Of course, there's more, trash can and car are more in common than, you know what I mean?
Yeah. But what I'm trying to say is that joy and happiness are not opposite ideas. They're very similar ideas.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll push back on happiness because I just keep going back to like Matrix example, where it's like, oh, you want to live in a relationship? It's like, okay, here's a VR, indistinguishable from real life, that you have an AI family and you have all the love that you want. And it's like, is there a difference between if it's fake or real?
Well, that's one of the points of the Matrix, though, isn't it?
Can you tell?
Yeah.
Right, but if it's subjective happiness, doesn't matter if the person on the other end is real or not.
So the problem in the Matrix was the person on the other end was real.
All right, well,
But it was a computer. It was a
I'm saying
AI.
simulation. If it's just a simulation, that makes people happy.
What do you mean by just a simulation?
That it's indistinguishable in the brain, in neuron.
But let's assume that what the Matrix depicts as the base reality there, which is humans that are all in a neural network or as batteries, and that their minds are plugged into the Matrix, and that the Matrix is simply the construct that humans are interacting with each other in, because humans do interact with each other in that Matrix, but they also interact with the machines. And in the Matrix world, these machines are conscious beings, just like the humans are. That is to say, they have true substrate independent intelligence. So there is a relation. The family that you're interacting with in the Matrix is in fact either actual other humans, in which case those are other minds, or you're interacting with the computer's mind. So the computer family that's sitting there trying to make you feel good, like they have a relationship with you. And they're trying to make, now the architect tells you why they want you to be happy. And they want you to be happy so that you don't kill yourself. And if you don't kill yourself, then you can be part of their neural network or battery fund. So they only want you to be alive. But they're trying to make you happy in order to keep you alive as long as they can. So maybe you say, well, that's not loving, which I would agree with. But the bottom line is there is still a relationship there. It's between a machine AI and is a machine mind and your mind.
Okay, well, I'm thinking of the example of a simulation with AI that's not actual intelligence.
But that's self-contradiction. Artificial intelligence is not an intelligence.
The common uses of AI.
But that's not. But in the Matrix, it's a mind. It's another mind. It's a self-aware mind.
Well, like, give it another year or two, and like ChatGPT is going to be pretending to be someone's girlfriend.
Yep.
And
it's not another year, brother. It's already out there.
Like, it's happening now.
Yeah.
People use it for therapy now by just chatting their problems out,
Right.
and
So
it gives them the therapist answer.
Okay. So what's your point there? That's different than the Matrix, but let's say it's ChatGPT, which really is the product. If you say, what is ChatGPT? And the answer is a bunch of minds got together and wrote code so that when you interact with this thing, their minds have supplied you these answers they just told you ahead of time, which is not different than what you do already. If your friend comes to you right now, if I said, Michael, if your friend Timmy comes to you and says X, Y, and Z, or asks for A, B, or C, what would you tell them? Many of the times you'd probably say, I would tell them X, or I would say Y. So you've actually already written the code, right? And the fact that they come in to interact is kind of quote unquote artificial in that it's something you already know or already would think. How's that different from what you're saying?
Well, I'm just saying, like the super advanced video game that's like complete immersive simulation. Someone in that becomes happy, like, but we're saying there are actions in it aren't real.
Well, let's
So
say.
is there,
So I don't know that their actions in it aren't real. So there's a video out there, and I don't know where I saw this, but it was like a short clip of, I think it was like a girlfriend or wife who shot the video of this guy in VR, and he's sitting there doing this in the real world. And when you look at what he's doing, it's either in some like zombie apocalypse thing or some murder game or something. He's literally got the head of this bloody head, and he's beating it against some object. And like at some point you don't care whether it's real or not, do you? You're like, this is a guy who thinks it's okay to do whatever this thing is. And whether you're doing it in the virtual world or whether you're doing it in the real world may not make that much of a distinction, especially the more realistic that gets. Which is why, well, forget why. But ultimately we care about the heart or the intent of the person. Like if you found somebody you loved playing a video game in which they were just running around murdering people and clearly enjoying it, would that make you feel good, better, or worse about that person based on what your current assessment is of their character? So, and I ask this not because they're just, like, it's not real. Okay, I got it, it's not real, but can you explain to me why you enjoy murdering people? Well, it's fun. I don't know how to say it. It's just fun. You're like, you take one step back as you not.
You're messed up.
Yeah, right. And at some point, we want to look at some of these video games and be, wow, people are messed up that play these things. I look at movies that are made, and some of which, like, I have learned the premise of the movie, and I'm very sorry that I learned the premise of the movie. That I'm like, I don't know who made that movie, but I know that they are either possessed, badly mentally damaged, or like have had the worst possible life ever. Something's very, very wrong with them. And they're like, oh, it's all fiction. I'm like, nope, it's not all fiction. Something came from inside your mind and said that this is something that you thought was worth putting on film. So I think that I'm less concerned with this distinction between the virtual and the real, because I happen to think that your reasons for engaging in them in either case are the same.
or is there a difference between the video game where someone's going around helping poor people in the video game that are just like computer,
Yes.
and someone going in real life going around helping poor people?
Yeah, there is a difference. But the idea is if the person enjoys that, then one of the next questions you would ask them is, you enjoy doing this on the video game. Why don't you do it in real life?
I mean, it costs, in the video game they have infinite money cheat code activated,
Yep.
and in real life they don't.
Okay. And then you might say to them, what if we saved up this amount of money and did this thing for this person? Would that help? Would you feel better about it? And then you start having the discussion about what, the real world versus virtual world, what its impacts are, how it makes you feel. And eventually I think what you do is get to the person to say, if you're just enjoying the dopamine hit or whatever that's making you feel good about this, is what you're doing good, given that you could be doing actual good for other people, and find out what their real base reality is. So if it's just dopamine, that could be selfishness. If it's, no, I enjoy actually helping other people, then an education conversation could help them out. But this is an interesting topic, but in the interest of pursuing maybe the original intent. In terms of happiness, I know you don't like the word, but whatever you think, what is the word that you think that people who are being loving is maximizing?
Goodness.
Okay, I'm good with goodness. Is there another word you want?
I'm thinking.
Okay. I'm doing the same thing. So I do think, and I mean, I don't know if this is a separate, I think this may have been a separate topic. Oh, it was. It was separate in one way, in that this right here, if you say, what's the relationship between God and science and truth? I think this was about me making a contention. If you're paying attention to this in any objective way, you'd see that these are so mutually reinforcing that science is as much a part. Science shows God's existence to such a degree that it's absolutely ridiculous to doubt it. That this right here, these are statements. This is the reality, and this is the epistemology. This is the method by which we find this that tells us about that. That these are all this just mental processes getting to the one objective reality. So in this side over here, that there's some relationship between happiness / joy and love and good. And that's not terribly hard to suss out, and that love was the selfless, benevolent regard for others. And that benevolent just means wants the good for. So love is when you want good for someone else, and if you love yourself, presumably means you want good for yourself.
Sure.
And that happiness or joy is the resultant emotional state or mental state of when you have the kind of love that brings you goodness. And now we have to ask, well, what is the goodness that it brings us? And if the goodness is itself, well, and let me ask you this. Is it the knowledge? Is what you really want the knowledge that the other person really does want the good for you? And furthermore, let's say believes that you are good. So what we really want is other people to believe we're good. Like the surfer who competes wants other people to believe that they're a really good surfer, maybe the best surfer. The person who is proposing to somebody marriage wants that other person to believe that they are good enough for them and that they're declaring that they think they're good enough for you. That the love relationship is about entering into a relationship where both you feel good, that the best love relationship is the following. You feel that you are good. You want to share your goodness with the other person. You believe that that other person is good and that they believe you are good and that they want to share that goodness with you. But that's really what the best form of love looks like, is that you are good and they know you're good, and they are good and you know they're good, and that you want that goodness for each other. That's the best form. That's the best state of love. Okay, well, pick it apart, whatever.
And what I'm thinking is, the reality is, you're not good.
Right, but that inhibits our love relationship.
And that does, however, a real relationship, an honest.
But that's because we're in phase 1. In phase 2, like, are we good in heaven?
Sure.
Okay, so phase 2 is where we get to this.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would say here in the present, you realize that the person that you're loving also isn't purely good, and yet you love them anyway. And there's that sense of trust. Maybe trust is strongly involved in it.
I agree with that. But ultimately, when you marry somebody,
yeah.
And by the way, one of the things that we criticize, especially ladies for on this one, is ladies stop marrying men and saying, I'm going to marry them because I hope that he will become the man that I want him to be, right? Yeah. Like basically, people keep telling women, and men too, but it seems that a lot of this counseling is directed towards women, of He is what you see, and he's probably not as good as what you see. So if that's not good enough, don't buy it.
Right.
But I don't like that criticism. I mean, what the ladies supposedly want here is what we should want, which is, I'm meeting you at this phase, and here you are at some age. This was you being born, and this is you at 18 or 20 or wherever it is that I'm meeting you. And here's your goodness over time, which hopefully was doing this. Probably may have been doing this, but hopefully with an upward trend.
That's right.
And that I see you here, but like my hopes for you is that this is not as good as you get. My hope for you is that you continue to rise and become better and better and better, and that we do that together. So I don't think it's right to tell the woman, don't hope that. What we should be saying is not assume that this is the best he's going to be. What we should be saying is, do you know this track and trajectory? And did you have reason to believe that, like any good stock market index fund, he's going to go up over time? And if that's not the case, then for heaven's sakes, don't buy it.
And also, will you be satisfied if this is as good as it gets?
Yes, but should she be?
Well,
Like, what human being are you like, hey, all of your moral progress happened by the time you were 22 years old,
well,
and
you can hope.
I'm happy that you've never gotten any
difference
better.
here.
You can hope that there's better, but if you're not satisfied with where they are now, then the hope for better is pipe dream or whatever. I mean, is unreasonable.
So that is the point, but I'm saying that I object to that point. Now, I'm not saying that point isn't right most of the time, or isn't the way that it works out most of the time. I do agree that that's the way that it works out most of the time. What I'm saying is, not just a woman, but a man should be looking at the person and saying, are these people who are going to continue to grow in Christ over time?
So
And if the answer to that question is not yes, then you should be very skeptical about it.
Yeah.
Right.
You want a trend?
Yeah.
Say that.
Yeah.
And also do another video on your Proverbs. What is it? Proverbs 10? Proverbs 31. Just do a video on
The proverb, how to select a partner.
how to
husband and wife.
select a partner in life.
You want
That's
that?
not really-
Okay.
So I think the problem with
This isn't helpful, man. We're trying to drill in on the stuff. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you.
I think the issue that you're pinning, though, is maybe a little bit misrepresented. Because I think what's going on is if you're marrying someone and you think, well, I can change them to what I want them to be.
I didn't say that.
Yeah, but that is the base level issue, right? Not that they are growing, but
I agree.
I buy a car,
but let me.
I want them to change it, and then it's not about the other person; it's about you.
So I
And
agree
that's
with
the
you. But so in order to be qualified to make this assessment, this assessment, you have to be intellectually honest enough to say, am I trending up over time?
Yeah, sure.
And if your answer is like, no, I'm static, but I want this person to bring me up, then I say this to young men all the time. They're like, I'm like, you have to be the man that you want the woman you want that's who she would want.
Absolutely.
And if you're not that guy, then you're not being loving at all, right? You want the person you love to settle for something that's less good than what she should want, unless her expectations are wildly unrealistic.
Sure, but I still think the argument is valid to warn people against trying to change, getting involved in a relationship, a marriage relationship, in which you want to change them to serve your needs.
Right. Yeah, you have to be this as well. That's right.
Yeah.
I agree.
I think your model with happiness on the curve depends on how much time people assume they have.
Yes.
Because most people, it's like if there's no afterlife, it's only 90 years or something.
Mm-hmm.
And people calculate that. And for that, like fake goods in quantity
Yes.
can generate enough happiness in 90 years. And if each one of them has like diminishing returns, it's like, well, who cares in the 90 years? I don't hit that diminishing return point yet.
So I buy that argument theoretically. The problem I have with it practically is when you find the ultra rich who like guys like Elon probably doesn't run out of ideas before he runs out of money because he wants to go to Mars. But like, there's nothing in his personal, in the kind of day-to-day stuff that we have that he can't immediately satisfy if he wants to. He does not appear to be happier than let's say, the average Christian, which is a problem for the hypothesis of I can buy my way to happiness, or even people who have dedicated to buying themselves their way to happiness. They can't sustain it. They can't sustain it for 80 years. They can't sustain it for 8 months. So when you actually look into the, so I know a few of these ultra-rich guys here and there that I bumped into, not because I know them personally, but through friends or work relationships or something like that. And those guys are not happy.
I mean, that's a certain personality type. There's also, lots of
What, rich is not a personality type.
No, but they pursued like money in that regard. Where you have
No, some of them pursued it, some of them inherited it. Some of them did nothing for it. One of them was my wife's childhood friend was the nanny for a family that like private jets everywhere. And she was packing them a lunch one time, and the kids were like, "What are you doing?" And she's like, "I'm packing a lunch for you to take on the plane." And when the 8-year-old shakes her head and is like, "Oh, nanny's name, you have so much to learn." Like, it's very condescending, like, they have food on the plane, you don't have to worry about that. Wow. But those kids are not, they didn't earn it. They showed up and got it. And those kids are not happier than other kids.
Right, but there's like a novelty stimulation, like treadmill amount. But there's also like people in Japan that just like stay inside, play video games until they're 60, and they die. No one even knows that they died in their room.
Yep.
And they're like, this is the amount of stimulation I would like, and I don't have to interact with anyone. I don't have any inconvenience. Or even like, I don't know, Hindu monks that meditate on their own for decades. It's like, oh, I'm exploring like inside my mind, and I don't have to interact with anyone.
But what's your point about either the video game player or the Hindu monastic?
See, if like that was enough that they didn't seek more, they felt satisfied enough in that they weren't compelled to seek more happiness.
I don't think that the observation people settle on certain levels of happiness is an indication that those people think that that's the maximum level of happiness that they could attain. In fact, they wouldn't keep doing what they were doing.
Sure.
Otherwise.
Right, but the cost to climb to the next level, I guess they don't calculate that they would see the return.
But they could be wrong about that. They could be wrong about that, is the point.
They could.
In fact, they are wrong about that. You think they're wrong about that because you're not doing that. In fact, most of us think they're wrong about that because we're not doing it. If we thought that was the key to happiness, we'd be all meditating or playing video games.
The longer that they do it, like if they're really old and they only have a week left to live, and it's like, I'm not changing my whole life for 1 week of suffering to get the next reward, because there is no next reward at that point.
I agree, but what I'm saying, I took your point to be epistemic in that it was saying how that these people make these decisions to live a certain way because they have calculated it and said, if there is no afterlife, then all I'm going to do is play video games. And I'm saying even people who say there is no afterlife, and so I'm going to do the maximum I can to make me happy, wouldn't necessarily say playing video games is the thing that's going to make me the happiest. Right? So the Hindu monk he's not just meditating because meditation makes him happy. Every Hindu monk that you grab and you're like, what are you doing? His answer is, I'm meditating. Why are you meditating? Well, because I'm trying to become one with whatever. Why are you trying to become one with whatever? So I can become enlightened. Why do you want to become enlightened? Because the state of enlightenment is a euphoric, ecstatic state, a higher happiness state that I'm trying to reach. And I'm willing to sacrifice every year from here to there in order to hit it. They're not meditating for meditation's sake. They have a purpose. The video game player may have settled, but they have settled on something. Like if you asked them, if you quizzed them, if you ran it down and said you could do this, or by the way, the woman you really want, the family you really want, the whatever you really want, you can have that over here. I'll trade you your video game station for that. Would they take it? So I would speculate that the 60-year-old Japanese man that died on his tatami mat and nobody knew it probably doesn't think that's the happiest he could possibly be. He just may wrongly think that's the happiest that he can get. Sorry, I'm ignoring your hand. You've got to switch arms or you're going to get a huge muscle on this side.
That's a different joke. Path of least resistance makes me happy. Happy adequacy makes me happy. You know, it's good enough. I'm happy. But for myself, and this is the Sunday school Jesus answer. It's always the answer. The most happy is knowing God's love and grace.
Is knowing.
Is knowing God's love and grace.
Yes, yes.
And.
But I think that's because of this. So
Okay.
why?
Well, grace
That's
is
why.
important because otherwise you get self-reflective and you are aware of all the negative in your life.
But grace is God saying, I'm going to you can still be good. You're not disqualified.
Great. And the other part of that, because it has to do with our future, is having the sense that God is pleased with me.
Yes, yes. I think that's very, very, very important. And that's why when I said, like I was trying to say, you think you're good and the other person thinks you're good. We want God to think we're good. Like that's the goal.
Well done.
Well done, good and faithful servant. Like, oh, all I got to hear is that.
Yeah.
No, yes. And then we doubt. We're like, but he's not going to say that to me. Right? So, but that's what we want. That's the point. That's what would make us happy.
And it's that acceptance, it's the relationship aspect that I was talking about.
But it's not just acceptance. Acceptance would be, I'm a terrible murderer and God accepts me anyway. Like that would make us initially happy. But if the whole time we think like God's like, this is my good guy. Mark over here, he did really good stuff. This is my really good guy. Fill in the blank. This is my really good girl over here. And here's Mark. I mean, he's a murderer, worthless jerk. But like, yeah, no, I still accept him. Like that, we're just like, oh, that's not what we want. What we want is, this is Mark. He used to be a bad guy, but man, let me tell you who he's become now.
Sure.
That's what we want God to say. Which is why the good is not separable from love, which is not separable from happiness and joy.
Yeah, maybe there's a little both in there, right? Because we all have to recognize that we are not good in order to realize the grace and understand.
I think I'm not saying maybe is there a little of both. I'm saying necessarily it's all of it. Because of the definitional relationships of these words, with the exception of happiness, love and good are inextricably definitionally related.
Sure.
Happiness and joy, I think, come into that because we recognize that there's an attendant mental state with holding a belief. So if you hold a belief about something, some of the things you hold beliefs about tend to give you something that we characterize as emotions or feelings, or at least regards as to whether we think they're desirable or undesirable.
We may be saying the same thing.
I think we are.
A side note is, this past week I just happened to watch a video from Veritasium on happiness, which was actually really interesting. So, worth looking at.
Yes, that one I've seen. Like you, I disagree with his assessment of happiness.
Yeah.
Okay, what else? Yes, sir.
Well, what do you say to the Hindu monk? He says, like, all of this isolation will be worth it with enlightenment. It's like, are you doing any good deeds? And it's like, no. It's like, are you pursuing any loving relationship with other people? It's like, no. But it's like, oh, well, it's like this enlightenment state is not going to be worth it. It's like, well, I believe it is.
Right.
And I'm optimizing happiness. And I don't care about the other two are illusionary distractions.
Yes.
From this enlightenment state.
Well, like Buddha, who, by the way, I don't think hit a state of enlightenment before he died, Buddha referred to his own son as the ball and chain that was keeping him linked to this world. And he believed that he needed to be completely cut off from any love or regard for the world in order to attain this enlightenment. It turned out he's just wrong, which is why he wasn't as happy as he could have been. So back to is there such a thing as the objective truth about what makes us happy? Yes, there is an objective truth about what makes us happy, and most people are wrong about that most of the time.
I guess I would say they have thousands of years of tradition that say otherwise, and people saying enlightenment is the best thing.
But none of them have reached it. So how would they know?
They say they.
No. The number of people who supposedly reached enlightenment is vanishingly small. It's like Buddha, and I'm not even sure there's anybody else on the list right now. Most everybody in the belief system believes that they are on life X in times X lives, in the purpose of eventually hitting enlightenment,
So
and that only the Buddha has done so successfully, or he and a few others have done it.
Then they're investing for the next round, which.
Yeah, but that's back to your point of those aren't people who don't believe in heaven; they just believe in a different heaven.
Right, but in their system, they're optimizing happiness.
You sort of, in their system, they're optimizing a desire towards being taken up into a single universal consciousness in which their own consciousness is lost and subsumed into that one universal consciousness. So they seek to drink oblivion, not happiness.
I was going to say, for clarity, I thought my understanding of Buddhism was that they believe this world is illusion.
Yes.
And that happiness itself is
Illusory as well. Yeah, and the truth is just realize that ultimately you're trying to realize the truth that we're all one thing, not these disparate things.
But that attachments lead to suffering.
They believe, so the problem with Buddhism that isn't called out is extreme pessimism. Yeah. The extreme pessimism of Buddhism is this life is unhappy. The reason it's unhappy is because you're buying into a lie. The lie that you're buying into is that we're all separate things. In reality, we're all one unity. If we recognize the fact that we were just one unity and all our consciousnesses were returned to that unity in such a way that we didn't think of ourselves as something separate, then we won't suffer anymore. And so to the Buddhists, it seems to me, based on some of what they say, that they think that happiness is the absence of suffering. I say there's something much more positive on the other side of that. But I could be wrong.
So to that video, it was interesting because they interviewed a bunch of people on the street. These are people on the street.
That are willing to stop and talk to somebody.
They're willing to talk to somebody. And they played just the first half of that interview at the start. At the end, they finished it, and every one of those people said, yeah, money, but really what I want is just to have essentially a relationship with my family and another person. That's really what it boils down to.
Yeah, and this is where I go. I mean, Harvard, I think, does it a little bit better than he does because he stops at relationship. Harvard's long-running study on happiness was happiness equals love, full stop.
Right.
Was what the director said.
Yeah.
So that, I'm like, yay, Harvard, took you 7 years to get to something that Jesus told you fairly quickly, right? So.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Well, I mean, to their credit, they empirically, at least partially empirically derived it. All right. Let me, in the interest of time, since we have 6 or so minutes left, let's go down the remaining. Yeah. So, for this one, are we happy with this?
I was going to add something like you would treat children different than pets, and I guess children kind of have the same one face, two face.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. I get you now.
A testing, and then there's a independence.
Okay.
And if you replace phase one with more descriptive.
Yeah. Okay. All right, understood. I'm going to put these over here. All right. Okay. You question format and length. What's your belief on that topic?
I was just curious.
Absent any other thinking on it, how would you do it?
I like the short idea, like you said. I know I click on longer videos for shorts.
I've heard it said, I have not seen the data myself, but that 75% of the viewers on YouTube are male. So that,
Our man.
yeah,
Really?
yeah. It's mostly guys on YouTube.
Wow.
I think that you nailed it with, you want the shorts to bring people in. I know quite often I'm scrolling through shorts on YouTube.
Yeah.
And then someone will say something that catches my attention, and I really want to know the context.
Yes.
And so I click on their account and I look at, or I try to research it. My frustration is quite often you click on the comments for that short and they don't actually have the link that they're talking
Yeah,
about. Like,
right.
Where are you?
Hey,
the
lies,
larger
sir,
picture?
lies, yes.
Yeah, but then you find the larger picture and then you kind of fill in the blank.
So I would note that there, as YouTube has noted a long time ago, and Facebook and TikTok and everybody else there are things that you search for, and that there are things that you consume because you search for them. And then there are things that after you search, they pop up that are not apparently the exact answer to what you asked, but they still recommend. So it seems to me that it's like, you search this topic, here are 3 videos on this topic, here's a video on a topic that's very tangentially related, but they've inserted it as result number 4. And then you're back to stuff that's relevant, and then there's other stuff of decreasing relevance the further you go. And I don't think that's just a function of odd keyword searches. So I think that they're also saying these are related topics that you're likely to click on. Then after you search, presumably coming up in some alternate side is the clickbaity stuff that relates to stuff that you've searched that you're like, this wasn't what I'm looking for, but I'll listen to 60 seconds on this because that was interesting. And then presumably if the clickbait then leads you to the longer video of, like nobody was clicking, I imagine, on extended topics on Bertrand's paradox and number file, right? You had to watch the first one to be interested in the second one. But
they could do like a 30-minute video, but then make the first 5 or less minutes like the quick intro thing.
Yep.
And then you start with the main objection, or it's like, oh, I think happiness is like subjective, whatever.
Yep.
And then have like the quick recap argument, and then end with like the number of follow-up objections.
Yep.
It's like, oh, what about this? What about this? What about this? And it's like, click the long video to hear all these objections answered.
Yes. So I like that idea, but the only thing that I would do based on Veritasium's thing is I'd like to insert those objections briefly in there where you're like, people will object by saying 1, but that's wrong because of A. For more on this one, click in the link below. Some people say that this is wrong, but that's because, and they think objection 2, and so that's wrong because of B, and here it is. Because Veritasium's hypothesis, if you believe the data that he cites, is you get people to learn better by mentioning the things that they probably hold wrongly in the course of the educational portion of it at first, and then you give them the correct solution later. And so I want to do what you're saying, but I want to do it in a slightly different order than you proposed. But that may not work.
The folks in this room are primarily interested in the theology and philosophy of the topics, not necessarily in cracking the YouTube algorithm.
Right.
I'm wondering if there's value in us searching for or consulting with somebody who maybe has done more social media research and might be able to give us some quick direction on the best way to actually garner an audience.
I'm all for it. I've yet to find
The YouTube expert?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's because YouTube's like, yeah, we're not telling you. Once you know, we give you a call and you're like, sorry,
All of the best.
you have to move to Seattle. We're not.
Right. All the best content. People talk about this constantly, how there's the algorithm. And
What is it?
It changes all the time.
Right.
And they're constantly trying to reverse engineer it. Obviously, so that, because if you could fully reverse engineer it, then you could simply make a bunch of trash videos that garner a bunch of likes.
Right. But presumably the algorithm is looking for people who are doing that and then intentionally trying to cat and mouse.
Yeah. Well, it's like any video that they can amend to another video that someone would click on and watch.
So this is why I'm
related aspect to that too. If once you load a video, if no one watches it in the next 2 weeks, it won't be recommended.
Right.
So there is that.
Which is why I'm trying to I want to build the whole thing before we launch it initially so that we can see how high it would go. And then if that worked well, then do a quality version of it and see how high that would go. And then maybe take some strategic stuff and say okay, can we seed some of this? Let's do an analysis of the topology of the internet and see if we can by advertising drop the stuff that into the right places that gets the right attention that then brings people back to all this. So Like, I don't think that the idea is publish these videos as they come up. I think the idea is get it done this year, or this 6 months, or this whatever we think it is for version 1, and drop all of it together, and then work our way around. Because the whole goal of this one is, like, I don't care if anybody solves Bertrand's paradox out there. I'm entertained by it, but I'm as entertained by it as I am by adequately stacking blocks high enough. What I care about is this stuff right here, and that stuff is it's foundational. I think if you understand that stuff, it helps you understand that stuff. But this stuff, to your point, is the point. Okay? Because the knowledge of God is more important than the knowledge of the world. The knowledge of the world is supposed to help you understand who God is, but it's not the end. It's not the end result. It's not like, oh, I understand how physics works, I'm done. Now, physics points us to things that God has done in things, and that's the interesting part. All right, we are out of time. So, God willing, I will have at least a version of this first one up that we'll watch next time, and if that is, I will bring whatever I've got next time, and we can start to comment, cut it apart, / put it back together, and take all the feedback and figure out what to do next. But thank you all very much for, like, this project I think is very, very interesting. And some people who are close to me in my life have said they think that this might be God's immediate work for me. And so I have given it now a higher priority than I would otherwise have done. But this is where it's all being done. So if you're willing to partner with me on it, I'm interested in getting this complete. Thank you. We'll see you guys next time.